At 4:06 a.m., the front door creaked open. She didn't know I was awake. The house was still. No lights. No TV glow. Even the refrigerator had stopped humming. Something that never happens, but somehow did. The only sound was the soft thud of her heels in her hand as she tiptoed across the hardwood floor like a teenager sneaking back after curfew. Except she's not a teenager. She's my wife. The stairs creaked. Step 3 and step 6, the usual culprits, and I heard the pause. She was listening, making sure I wasn't up. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched the hallway, a shadow within a shadow. She reached the bedroom, closed the door, locked it, and I sat in the hallway for 4 whole minutes. For minutes of complete, stretching silence. For minutes where I tried to convince myself that I hadn't just heard a man's voice outside 30 seconds before the door opened. It had said, "Text me when he's gone." For minutes later, I stood up, walked into the kitchen, pulled out the pad we usually used for grocery lists, and scribbled 7 words. "I'm leaving. Good luck with your." I left it on the coffee maker, the one she never cleaned, the one I always wiped down because she was too tired. I packed a duffel with the calm of a man who'd already cried everything out 2 weeks ago. Before I walked out, I glanced at the fireplace. There was a shoe on the floor, hers, with a receipt crumpled underneath. I picked it up. The date was yesterday. The time, 11:22 p.m. The item, room 418, King Suite. One night. The address, a hotel I pass every day on my way to work. But that wasn't the part that made me sit back down and question everything. It was the name on the bill. It wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. It was someone I knew. And if that name is who I think it is, then this isn't just betrayal. It's something else entirely. I stared at the name on the receipt so long that the letters stopped looking like letters. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from disbelief, like my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. You know that thing where your mind tries to protect you by pretending something isn't real? That's what was happening. My hand was literally trembling. Not because it was a stranger's name. No, that would have been easier. That would have been clean. But it wasn't. It was Brett Mathers. My cousin. Not my best friend. Not my coworker. My cousin. The same guy who gave a toast at our wedding about how true love always finds its way back. The guy who spent last Thanksgiving on my couch because he said he was getting his life back together. The one I defended when everyone else in the family called him unreliable, reckless, toxic. I was the only idiot who kept giving him second chances. Apparently, my wife gave him a very different kind of chance. I dropped the receipt. It didn't float like I thought it would. It hit the tile with a flat slap. I must have sat there for 10 minutes, breathing like I'd just run a marathon, except my legs hadn't moved. It wasn't even the affair itself that gutted me. It was the deliberate choices, the premeditation, the planning. A hotel suite, under his name, close enough for me to see from my office window if I'd just looked hard enough. She didn't just betray me. She coordinated it with someone who knew every crack in my life. And then the worst thought came. It wasn't a question. It was a sick realization. This wasn't the first time. You don't book hotel rooms on a whim with your husband's cousin unless you've already blurred the lines a while ago. Suddenly, 100 moments in the past year sharpened into focus. The way she'd casually ask how Brett was doing. The time I came home to find him sitting at our kitchen table without me knowing he was stopping by. The inside jokes they exchanged that I was supposedly too uptight to get. I stood, punched the countertop. I don't even know why. It's not like it helped. Just left a shallow dent in the fake marble and pain in my knuckles. I was pathetic. A ghost in my own house. And the woman upstairs, the one I swore to love, was probably asleep with wet hair from a shower she didn't take for me. I grabbed my keys, duffel, and opened the front door. But then I stopped. Something inside me wouldn't let me go just yet. There was one more thing I needed to see. I walked upstairs. Quiet. Careful. Every creak in the floorboard sounded like thunder in my ears. Her door was closed. Locked like before. But the light from beneath it was still on. And then, a sound. A short laugh. Then silence. She wasn't alone. I froze. The kind of freeze where your blood doesn't even bother to move anymore. The door was still locked, but her voice slipped through it like smoke. Muffled, but clear enough to recognize. She was whispering. Not the tone of someone who's ashamed or afraid. No. She sounded amused. Relaxed. Like nothing about what she was doing was wrong. Then, a pause. And a laugh. Not hers. His. That low, careless, smirking chuckle I'd heard 1,000 times at family dinners, game nights, or when Brett would tell some exaggerated story to get attention. But this time, it hit differently. It wasn't harmless. It was the sound of a man who'd won something he never deserved to take. I stepped back slowly, careful not to creak the floorboards, though part of me wanted to barge in, scream, throw things, demand answers. But something in my gut held me down. Not fear. Not even shock anymore. Something colder. Clarity. If I walked in now, what would I even say? Would I beg for an explanation? Ask how long? Why him? Why now? No. I'd get half-truths, manipulations, maybe even an apology rehearsed to sound sincere. And Brett would do what Brett always does, grin, shrug, and pretend like rules don't apply to him. I went into the guest bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed like a man sitting in a church pew at his own funeral. My hands were still shaking, but my thoughts were starting to line up. The thing about betrayal is, once the dam breaks, the flood reveals everything you refused to see before. Like how she suddenly forgot our anniversary last month, but remembered Brett's birthday. How she changed her phone passcode 3 times in 6 weeks. How she started hiding her location under the excuse of battery-saving mode. Or how I once came home early and found her in the backyard, phone to her ear, barefoot, laughing so freely I didn't recognize her voice. And when she saw me, she ended the call mid-sentence. Said it was a coworker. I believed her. God, I believed her. And now they were upstairs, whispering, laughing, in our bed, maybe, with our sheets. The same ones we picked out together in that overpriced boutique she just had to visit. I stared at my duffel bag. Leaving felt too easy now. Not satisfying. Not enough. She needed to know I knew. Not in a scream or a slap or a late-night scene with neighbors watching through curtains. No. Something quieter. Heavier. Final. I walked back to the kitchen, grabbed a fresh sheet of paper, and rewrote the note. The first version felt vague. Safe. This time, I made sure there was no room for confusion. You didn't just break me. You replaced me, and you didn't even bother to hide it. I'm leaving. Enjoy the ruins you built. I placed it on her vanity, right next to her favorite perfume. Then I went back downstairs and opened the closet by the laundry room. I hadn't touched it in months. Inside was the manila folder I'd nearly forgotten about. One I hadn't opened since the day I suspected something, long before Brett. Inside were copies of her texts. Screenshots from a cloud backup she never knew I had access to. There were names. Conversations. Most were harmless. But one wasn't. One went back farther than I ever expected. Back before Brett. Before the job change. Before the wedding, even. I read a message she sent 7 years ago to a number saved as N. If he ever finds out, I'll just lie. He's too soft to leave anyway. She wasn't talking about Brett. So now I had to ask myself, who was N? I sat there for over an hour staring at that single letter, N. Like it was some kind of cursed symbol. One message. 7 years old. Before our marriage. Before the vows. Back when we were just a couple talking about rings and registries and venues. Back when I thought I was the lucky one. It haunted me, that line. He's too soft to leave anyway. She said that about me. She said it to N. I don't know why I hadn't remembered that folder until tonight. Maybe it was self-preservation. I must have sensed back then that something wasn't right, but I buried it under layers of optimism and self-delusion. The man I used to be would have shredded those pages the second I read them, told myself, everyone makes mistakes, and crawled back to the illusion. But that version of me was gone now. I opened the old laptop again. The one she stopped using when I bought her a new one last Christmas. The same Christmas she told me I was too sentimental. I remembered I'd set it to automatically sync her phone data years ago, before she started locking everything behind Face ID and privacy walls. I typed in a search. Just one letter. N. Hundreds of hits came up. Messages. Photos. Audio notes. Most of the recent ones were blank. She must have disabled the sync years ago. But the old ones were still there, dusty and untouched. And in one of them, buried between notes about bridesmaids and honeymoon options, was a voicemail. 30 seconds long. Sent from her phone to N. No name. Just the initial. I clicked play. Her voice came through the speaker like a ghost. Younger and lighter than she sounds now. It was a flirtatious tone, the one she used when she wanted something. Hey, so I did it. I told him I want to be with him. I didn't say who, obviously, but he bought it. He cried a little. God, I felt bad, but not really. We'll figure the rest out later, right? Call me when you get off. Silence. She wasn't talking about me. She was talking about someone she left for me. That realization hit me harder than the betrayal with Brett. Because now it wasn't just about cheating. It was a pattern, a loop. A woman who never truly let go of anyone, just upgraded them when something shinier came along. I scrolled further down, opening old texts I'd never seen before. And then I saw a photo. Blurry. Shot in a mirror. Her sitting on a bed in a cheap-looking room, biting her lip at the camera. No clothes. No shame. And behind her, half cut off by the frame, a man's arm. Tattooed. Ring on the middle finger. A ring I recognized. It wasn't Brett. I checked the timestamp. It was dated 2 months before our engagement. My heart didn't just break. It warped. Reality felt elastic. Like I couldn't trust anything anymore. The dinners. The proposals. The honeymoon. What was real? Was any of it mine? I sat in the hallway and listened again to the sounds coming from upstairs. No voices now. Just the faint hum of her noise machine. The one she claimed helped her sleep, but mostly helped mask the fact she stayed up on her phone all night. I realized I didn't hate her. I hated what she turned me into. Quiet. Apologetic. Soft. A man too scared to speak up every time something felt off. A man who excused red flags as just being paranoid. But not anymore. If Brett was just the latest lie, and N was the origin of them all, then maybe it was time I stopped playing the abandoned victim. Maybe it was time I pulled on the thread until the whole thing unraveled. Because here's the thing. In all her lies, she missed one simple detail. One loose and she never tied up. She didn't delete my name from the backup either. And in the call log history, weeks ago, at 2:43 a.m., she called someone she labeled N for 12 minutes. But the number wasn't unfamiliar. Because it was registered under my father's name. I stared at the number for a long time, hoping, praying, that it was some sort of glitch. Maybe someone spoofed his number. Maybe it was a recycled contact. But no matter how many excuses I whispered to myself in that moment, I couldn't lie my way out of what I was seeing. She called my father. At 2:43 in the morning. And not once. Several times. Repeatedly. The logs showed conversations going back months. Always after midnight. Always short. Some were only 20 seconds long. Quick. Sharp. Others dragged past 15 minutes. I could picture her pacing barefoot around the kitchen while I lay in bed thinking she was scrolling through Instagram or answering emails. I picked up my phone, heart slamming in my chest, and pulled up his number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I couldn't bring myself to press it. What was I going to say? Hey Dad, I found out my wife might be cheating with you. Quick yes or no. It sounded insane. It felt insane. But in that moment, nothing felt impossible anymore. My relationship with my father was always complex. He wasn't abusive. Not loud. Not cruel. Just distant. A man who believed affection was something you earned, not given. I spent most of my life trying to impress him, grades, sports, jobs, promotions, but no matter what I did, his praise always came with a condition attached. Nice work, but don't get cocky. Proud of you, but you still have a lot to learn. You know the type. He met Adrienne 2 weeks after I proposed. He shook her hand, told her she was too pretty for a nerd like me, and laughed. She smiled. He smiled. And they talked. Too long. The whole night. She asked him questions I never thought she cared about. His old Navy years, his failed businesses, what kind of music he liked. I remember standing in the kitchen watching them talk on the couch and feeling something strange in my chest. Back then I told myself it was pride. Looking back now, it was the first flicker of warning. I dug deeper into the laptop, scanning through synced texts I hadn't noticed before. There weren't many. Most were short. But one stood out, timestamped 3:04 a.m., 2 weeks ago. From her to N. A single sentence. You promised this would stay between us. I felt my stomach twisting on itself. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sit still. I started pacing in circles through the living room, gripping my phone like it was going to burst into flames. My mind kept replaying every time Adrienne said something dismissive about him in front of me. Every sarcastic jab. Every "your dad's a little intense, huh?" Every eye roll when he'd call. Was that her covering her tracks? Was it all part of the act? And why the hell was he even entertaining her calls that late? There was only one way to find out. I left the house. Quietly. Didn't pack anything more. Didn't grab the note I wrote her. I left it there. Let her wake up to it, and wonder how long I'd known. I just grabbed my keys, slipped into the car, and drove. My parents live 30 minutes away on the outskirts of town. I don't even remember the drive. I just remember pulling up to that house I grew up in, the porch light still on, the same way it always was, like nothing in the world had changed. I didn't knock. I walked in. The door was unlocked. And there he was, my father, standing in the hallway in pajama pants and a worn flannel shirt, looking like I'd just kicked in his front door. His mouth opened like he was about to say something. But I didn't let him. "Why has my wife been calling you at 2 in the morning?" I asked, my voice low, shaky but steady enough to land the blow. His face didn't move at first. Then his eyes blinked, and he did that same exhale he always did when I disappointed him. And then, he said the last thing I ever expected to hear. "Because she wasn't supposed to marry you." For a few seconds, I thought I misheard him. My brain simply refused to let those words make sense. She wasn't supposed to marry you. The sentence just hung in the air like a fog, thick and suffocating. My father looked at me with that same unreadable face he used to wear whenever he talked about things I wouldn't understand. But now there was something new in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret, or something colder, like calculation. I stepped closer, my voice cracking in my throat. "What does that mean? What do you mean she wasn't supposed to marry me?" He rubbed his forehead, sighed, and leaned against the wall as if he'd been carrying a weight for years. "It was supposed to be temporary, Nolan," he said finally, his tone disturbingly calm. "An arrangement. You were never supposed to get attached." My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might black out. An arrangement? The word hit like a slap. "Are you saying you were involved in this?" His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and the silence between us was heavier than any answer. Then he looked away. "Adrian wasn't who you thought she was," he said quietly. "She didn't meet you by accident. You were meant to keep her close for a while, that's all. Nothing permanent. It got out of hand." I laughed, actually laughed, because the alternative was screaming. "You're lying," I said, though my voice was already cracking. "You're trying to twist this to make me doubt myself." He didn't even argue. He just walked past me into the living room and opened the old liquor cabinet. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, like we were having some casual talk about the weather. "She was working for me back then," he said, "doing some freelance consulting. I trusted her. I didn't expect her to get close to you." I stood there frozen. My mind was unraveling everything. Every holiday, every dinner, every smile that now felt staged. "Working for you? Doing what?" I demanded. He didn't answer right away. He just sipped his drink, and I swear I saw his hand tremble. "Background checks. Financial recon," he said finally. "After your mother passed, I was rebuilding a few things. Adrian helped me track assets, contacts. She was good at it. But she took an interest in you. I told her to keep her distance. She didn't." My knees felt weak. "You're saying she was hired to spy on me?" He didn't say yes, but he didn't deny it either. "You were reckless then," he murmured. "I thought you needed watching over. I never meant for it to go that far." I wanted to hit him, to throw the glass out of his hand, to make the world stop spinning long enough for any of this to make sense. But before I could say another word, his phone buzzed on the counter. He froze when he saw the name on the screen. He didn't move fast enough. I grabbed it from him. There it was, her name, glowing against the darkness like a brand. Adrian. She was calling him. At 4 in the morning. Again. I stared at the screen. Then I looked back at him. "Answer it," I said. He didn't. "Answer it," I shouted, slamming the phone against his chest. He pressed the button and put it on speaker. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then her voice came through, trembling, but not with fear. "Did you tell him?" she whispered. I could hear my own breathing echoing in the room. She sounded terrified, but also angry, like she'd lost control of a plan she thought she owned. "He came here," my father said flatly. "He knows." Silence. Then a sharp inhale on the other end. "Then it's over," she said softly. "You promised this wouldn't happen. You promised he'd never find out." And then she hung up. The phone dropped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at the man who raised me, realizing that my marriage, my life, every single thing I believed about loyalty, had been built on a lie they both designed. My father looked at me and tried to speak, but I didn't let him. I just turned around and walked out the door into the cold air, leaving him standing in the ruins of his own secret. As I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I knew one thing. Adrian had played me, but she hadn't done it alone. And whatever game they started years ago, I wasn't done yet. Not until I understood why. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of stepping back into that house made my skin crawl. Every piece of furniture felt like a prop in someone else's show. My life, my marriage, wasn't even a story about betrayal anymore. It was a performance, scripted from the start. And I'd been the fool playing the lead without ever seeing the director behind the curtain. I parked at the empty lakeside lot near the old dock where Adrian and I used to go before we got married. Back when it felt real. When she laughed like it meant something and touched my hand like she wanted to. I thought I was sitting there to clear my head, to breathe, to think. But I wasn't. I was waiting. For something to break. For something inside me to finally snap. It didn't take long. At 5:41 a.m., I got an email. From an address I didn't recognize. Subject line: "You deserve to know what they never planned to tell you." I hesitated before opening it. It could have been spam. Could have been bait. But I was too far in now to care. Inside was a PDF. Attached with no message, no explanation. Just a title: Private Agreement, Clayton Trust Assets. I opened it, and as the pages loaded, I felt my jaw tighten. It was a contract, detailed, formal, notarized. Between my father and Adrian. Dated 11 months before our wedding. The language was clinical, but the meaning was unmistakable. She would enter into a long-term relationship with me. Gain access to the social and financial benefits of the Clayton name. In return, she'd be compensated through a series of structured disbursements over 5 years, including access to an investment account that would be gradually transferred into her control once she was permanently established within the family. But it got worse. There were clauses about children, about PR appearances, about maintaining emotional cohesion in public settings. They had rules for how to behave around holidays, how to manage our social media. It was like they'd built our entire relationship in a boardroom. And near the end of the document, typed in clear black ink, was a sentence that gutted me deeper than any betrayal yet. At no point shall the subject, Forrest Clayton, be made aware of this agreement. I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even rage. I just stared at those words until they blurred. Everything suddenly made sense. The rapid shift from casual dating to talk of marriage, her sudden obsession with my father's approval, her resistance to having kids, the fact that she never once opened a joint account in my name despite years of promises. I was never her husband. I was her assignment. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to wake her up and throw the papers in her face. Demand she look me in the eyes and admit every lie. But some broken, exhausted part of me realized I didn't want her confession. I wanted her disappearance. From my house. From my mind. From everything that still had my name on it. But first, I needed leverage. I called a lawyer. Yes, it was early, but I had one on speed dial after handling my mother's estate. I told him everything, and he listened with a silence that only made the fire in my chest burn hotter. When I finished, he simply said, "Forward me the document and don't speak to either of them again until I call you back." I sent it and waited. At 7:12 a.m., I got a text. From Adrian. "I saw your note. Please don't do anything rash. Let's talk. This doesn't have to get ugly." That was the moment I knew she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing whatever payout she hadn't collected yet. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not just leave. Not just vanish. But take back what I still had control over. I turned the car around and headed back toward the house. Not to pack. Not to argue. But to do something final. Something she would never forget. Something legal. Clean. Precise. By the time I arrived, she was awake. Standing in the driveway. Hair messy. Still wearing the robe I bought her for our anniversary. And when she saw me, her face didn't show guilt or shame. It showed panic. Because she knew. She knew the act was over. The curtain had dropped. The lights were off. And I wasn't her audience anymore. She stood in the driveway like someone caught mid-scene without a script. Her robe fluttered in the wind. Her hair unbrushed. Mascara smudged just enough to look performative, like she had practiced a version of this breakdown before. I parked without looking at her and walked past without saying a word. The air between us was sharp, like everything we never said was still hovering there, daring us to scream it out loud. She followed me into the house. "Nolan, please," she said. Her voice cracked, but I didn't trust it anymore. Nothing from her mouth meant anything. I know it looks bad, but we were both in over our heads. It started as something else. I swear it became real. I paused, just long enough to look at her. You don't get to define what real is anymore, I said. You had a contract to love me. That's not love. That's strategy. She winced like I slapped her, but I was already moving. I walked straight into my office and pulled open the drawer where I'd hidden the copies. The contract, the messages, the backup drive, everything. I slid them into a folder and sealed it. When I turned around, she was still standing there, arms crossed like she was cold, but her eyes were scanning, calculating. That's when I realized. Adrian never cried unless it served her. You're not going to ruin me over this, she whispered. You won't get sympathy. You'll look weak. I'm not after sympathy, I said. I'm after peace. And trust me, this is how I get it. I left that folder on the kitchen table, not for her, but for my lawyer, who'd be arriving with a notary and an emergency prenup review. The moment she stepped out of the house, I had a legal block ready to freeze any transfer of assets, any claims to accounts, any stake in my name. The clause she forgot about? A morality clause tied to her access. A clause she helped write, ironically. But I didn't scream. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I gave her a deadline. You have 2 hours to leave. No contact. No second acts. If you say a word to my father again, this goes public. And not just with lawyers, with the whole damn family. Let's see how he looks when they find out what he funded. She didn't respond. She just stood there, still frozen. As I handed her the phone, she once hid everything inside and walked out the front door into the sunlight. My bag was already in the car. I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, I signed the final separation papers at a cafe by the coast, 5 hours away. The lawyer handed me the pen like it was a weapon, and I signed without hesitation. Adrian didn't show up. She didn't need to. It was all handled. What I didn't expect was how light I'd feel. There was no breakdown, no collapse, just release. The silence in my new apartment wasn't lonely, it was clean. I bought mismatched furniture. I started jogging. I adopted a dog. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I slept through the night for the first time in years. And one morning, I woke up without the weight on my chest. That's when I realized I hadn't lost anything. I'd been freed. I got an email a month later from a cousin who heard rumors. Brett had vanished. My father had gone radio silent. Adrian moved back to her hometown and, apparently, tried starting over under a different last name. I didn't care. Let them rebuild their empire of lies somewhere else. As for me, I'm still here. Still standing. Stronger. Wiser. Not perfect, but finally honest with myself. And if there's anyone out there reading this, wondering if walking away makes you weak, I promise you, it doesn't. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave quietly and live loudly.